Thank you everyone for attending. We received over 120 questions and registrations. And so amazing for you guys to be engaging with us. This is our first of this kind. We always have conversations behind the scenes. We get lots of questions from our community. So we said, hey, what the hey? Let's just get on a webinar and answer some questions and see what bubbles up. So tell us what you think, either during the show or afterwards. Let us know if we should keep doing it. As we went through all the questions, it was clear that there's some very definitive buckets. We have regulatory, quality and innovation, market trends, business strategy, and as we previewed, we have some of the best minds in the industry, arguably the best, if I do say so myself, to address some of those topics. Like I said, we have Diana Eberlein, our Chief Communications Officer, also the chair of the Coalition of Adult Beverage Alternatives. We have Dr. Harold Han, my partner in crime for the last 8 years, our chief scientist and the happy chemist. And then we have Ryan Pinsky, who is Ryan Pinsky. I mean, you either know him or you don't. And if you know, you know. All right. So rather than rapid fire through 120 questions in 45 minutes, I've done my best to kind of group these into broader questions. If we, for some reason, miss your question or you have another one pops up, drop it into the chat or we'll follow up with you afterwards. We're trying to keep this as engaging as possible, but also time efficient. So the session is being recorded. Like I said, we'll follow up afterwards. We'll share it. And just to level set expectations, this webinar is not scripted and we'll jump around. We also have a very broad purview of things. So like hemp beverages are where a lot of the questions were coming from, but we do get regulated cannabis questions. We operate in Canada and across multiple formats. So we'll try to preface it and provide multiple perspectives there. The goal here is to just, again, have a real conversation and hopefully provide some helpful insights. As it stands today, this industry is very, agile. I'm looking for the word. Diane always says in her presentations that they self-destruct and burn them as soon as she delivers them. So that's the fun of this market we get to operate in. All right, so that was fast. Anything you guys want to say before we jump in?
No, I'm excited. So many of you, RSVP'd and are in attendance right now, and we look forward to answering all your questions. It sounds like we're going to start with some heavy hitting ones on the regulatory front.
Yeah, topic one, regulatory. Thanks for speaking up. Great segue. This first question, I pulled from folks like Gary Kaminsky out of Florida, Shannon Miller from Thoroughbred Spirits, Rhino from Pharos, Jillian Shower from Canra. So we'll go with, like I said, a broader question to address all these. What are the most important regulatory changes happening right now? Right now. and how should operators be preparing for November? So what's happening now? What does that mean for November? And what are the most likely outcomes?
Yeah, and I mean, everyone on this call knows where we are with the current ban that is set to take effect after the November 12th deadline. So we are working really diligently on the Hill, focused on educating the White House as well as Congress on what we need to see corrected to not only support the CMS, which is the Medicare program that I think a lot of people have seen the releases about that 3 milligram per serving definition, and seeing that as an opportunity for change in the definition of the that passed in the funding bill. For that CMS program to exist beyond November 12th, there has to be a definitional change. Right now, you have a program that conflicts with policy. So there's a lot of interest in making sure that the education that's happening that on the hemp side, so that the hemp definition can be changed, doesn't just talk about the medical application and pathway forward there through the FDA. And the reason is, for most of the people who registered for this webinar, and obviously you guys know us for very much for our work on the beverage side, the beverage industry does not want to go through the medical channel. We want to be sold through Total Wine and Specs and Circle K and all those where other adult beverages are sold and served. So as a result, we are focused very much on education and making sure that we can potentially see change and regulation that treats us like other adult beverages. Um, I think the nicest way to wrap that up is what we are focused on is introducing legislation that outlines exactly what that should look like, that evens the playing field for the alcohol industry and also mitigates opposition from the marijuana side, because it's not just about good, sensible policy. It's also about being aware of how do we get to 218 votes in the House? How do we mitigate our opposition? So we have to kind of navigate multiple worlds. And that's kind of the beauty, I think, of Vertosa too. We obviously operate on the marijuana side. That's where we started. So we understand how all parties feel about this issue, and I think can really bring a balanced and sensible regulatory structure to the table that satisfies both sides.
So something I hear a lot is that with all this activity, with all this education, with the clear demand, the alignment of the alcohol industry, that we're still kind of in the situation of it being a coin flip. Is that still accurate? Are we beyond coin flip, 60-40?
Look, this is going to be a photo finish because we're also in an election year. And an election year makes it very difficult to pass legislation during that time. Oftentimes you'll hear about people not wanting to disrupt the apple cart. They're more focused, sometimes getting votes. And ironically, this is an issue that can actually bring more support to a candidate. It's got bipartisan support. So we are really angling on that to show that this is something that maybe can swing some votes in their direction. On top of the fact that we need to, I think, make it very clear that there are bad actors that have been highlighted by McConnell and Andy Harris and other groups, but there's also good actors. And we all know that bans don't work. That creates an illicit market, which we've seen in multiple markets already that have tried to ban some of these products. There's demand for this, and there's an opportunity to create a clear pathway forward. I do think that this is going to be a bit of a photo finish because of the election and the timeline. Where this language and where the adjustment is made in terms of correcting this so CMS can function properly, that's still kind of to be determined as well. There's a number of bills being circulated on the Hill. Some have been introduced. Obviously, we saw Rand Paul and Ernst and Klobuchar introduce a bill this week. There's definitely bills being circulated, getting feedback now from industry groups. But it's still very much TBD in terms of what's the pathway forward that corrects this, not only for CMS, but obviously for our products as well.
All right. Well, TBD, that sounds like uncertainty.
Welcome to cannabis, everyone.
Yeah. Ryan, you like with this level of uncertainty, you're dealing with the brands every day across the board. How should brands think about the risk right now across hemp versus cannabis, especially with DTC, especially as an enforcement uncertainty? There's been also a lot talked about like synthetics or semi-synthetic ingredients and what that means for the supply chain. But as the funnel, so to speak, starts to narrow as we approach November, like how are brands thinking about this? How are they preparing for that TBD of November?
I think it's the $1 million question that we get asked as many times a day as possible. And I think we're seeing a bunch of different strategies kind of unravel. And, I think what's most top of mind for people right now are two things. One, how do I make as much money as possible before November? Two, if November does happen, how do I keep my brand alive? And so we're starting to see several hemp national distributed brands veer off, whether that's into energy, functional beverage, alcohol. We're starting to see different ways that they feel that if November happens, that they're going to be able to maintain relationships, keep shelf space for their brand, but keep themselves top of mind. I think the other spectrum, which is a lot more difficult, is the pathway to regulated beverage. And I think a lot of people may view regulated beverage as an opportunity. It's extremely difficult. There's a lot more nuances to it when it comes to choosing the right in-state partner, when it comes to banking and insurance and 280. And so I feel like a lot of it is going to take careful and meticulous planning. But really, it's going to be the biggest question of all is how does our brand stay relevant after November if the ban happens? And what do we have to do to continue to develop or maintain the relationships that we built over the last 2-3 years that we've been distributing and selling hemp beverages in liquor and traditional grocery and all the incredible places that support our industry.
I want to dig into that a little bit, because we talk about kind of it in a binary fashion of like, we either get something done by November or not, right? And not being a ban, which sounds very definitive. However, there's been a lot of states that have created hemp regulations, and as this bill from the recent bill from Klobuchar and Rand Paul and Ernst signals, is that there's an opportunity to create like hemp marketplace even beyond the ban. And I guess the question that we've gotten from a number of folks is, how are we thinking about that? How are we preparing for that? And what's that potential intermediate kind of landscape look like?
I ask myself these questions all the time, and this is something that I talk to a lot of our partners in retail, in distribution, and in manufacturing. And I end up with more questions than answers. And the questions that I end up coming up with is the how. So November happens. Let's just say that it happens for the sake of saying it. And Ben, you know me, I plan for the worst. But I feel like what ends up happening in this situation is a couple things. One, in-state vertical integration is very possible. I think that it's more than likely in a handful of states. What I think a lot of people need to get their heads around is a couple things. One, your bev out distributors are probably not going to want to continue distributing your product. They're not going to be able to potentially hold it with their current inventory. They're not going to be able to remit funds with their current bank account. Their insurance provider is not going to allow it to continue. If they deal with the major bank, which most distributors do at the major bank, they're going to have to find a very nice credit union who's open to taking in this money. The second piece is the retail landscape. And so let's talk about Florida. ABC has done an incredible job of supporting our industry. We saw Circle K launch, but the reality is their POS systems and the way that they retain and manage funds right now is going to have to be entirely different. And so I envision a world where you walk into an ABC and maybe in the corner they have a different POS system where, just like in cannabis, it's cash or debit only. And that's transacted by a cannabis regulated POS software that's backed by a credit union, that's backed by an insurance provider who's specific to cannabis and hemp. And that's a supply chain that's going to have to be built out. I don't envision us having the same amount of point of sales that we currently have now. The distribution landscape is going to shift very drastically. And these retailers are going to have to get extremely smart about how they're doing it. And the back end goes beyond everything I just said. I mean, we're talking about different business structures, different corporations, different ways that they can eliminate 280E from their balance sheet, because that's a really big question. I think the other question that we need to start asking ourselves is who's going to make these products? Because I don't envision a world where TTB is going to allow alcohol and hemp to be processed in the same facility. And so we're going to have to find these standalone functional beverage manufacturing facilities that don't do alcohol, where they're going to be able to produce hemp beverages. And so I envision a world that looks very much like what we're used to in regulated cannabis. There's going to be segregated business units for segregated purposes. I can see standalone hemp beverage shops popping up all over the place in highly populated areas that are going to have great foot traffic and can support this business. And that's the world that I see. But again, I think it's going to be extremely competitive. I think that these beverage facilities are going to have to build up portfolio plays. Some of them may end up with their own brands and may favor them. And so yet again, I feel like we're going to consistently go back to regulated, but I see this as a huge opportunity for the people who get in early, have the right mindset to develop the frameworks to enable them to be successful, and really just copy the playbook of what's made a lot of these beverage brands successful in regulated cannabis. It can be done. I think it's going to be difficult, but we see tons of brands that are extremely successful in cannabis beverages. So why not in hemp?
Yeah, very good. Okay, so one more question kind of in this regulatory landscape, and I'm going to try to capture everything from Scott Schiller, Casey Callcross, Jennifer Watts, John Lynch, so on and so forth. But a lot of the questions were all just kind of like, what's going to happen, and like, what does the landscape look like? And it's a kind of a broad range, 1 year to 5 years. And I think a lot of us believe that this is an inevitable category, right? That the interests are there enough, that consumer has a history of getting what they want, albeit in a circuitous path sometimes. Like, I just want to go around the horn. And you can pick your time period. And Harold, I know you'll go for 5 years because that's where you like to live. So we'll start with Diana. Diana, what does the next year look like? And what should people be doing right now? And I'll say it for you, go join Kaba. But beyond that, like, what can they be doing to really like move the needle when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, and I'll talk about the short term and let some of the others talk about maybe some long term. Obviously, you know, Ben just mentioned Kaba. There are a number of groups looking to execute strategies to hopefully keep this open, whether it gets done before November 12th or it gets done afterwards with a new Congress. Ultimately, the best way that you guys can prepare for that is join an organization that aligns with your mission and financially fund them. It costs money to play in the political game, and if we want to keep this open, before November 12th or in the near future, we need those funds today. There's polling and all sorts of things that cost extreme amounts of money. So we need to be looking at collecting that now versus later to keep it alive. And I can tell you there's only one guarantee that I can see, and it's if we don't step up now and try to lean into this market to keep it alive, we are not going to see a clear pathway forward for the near future. And I think we all want to see November come, and for us to have a solution that has traction is moving towards keeping this category alive and in the retail channels that we want with interstate commerce and all the components that allow us to have as many point of sale opportunities as possible. So I guess where I'll start with is find an association that you believe aligns with your mission at the federal level, join that group and put funds towards it. You have to have a little bit of trust that they are going to spend that wisely and work towards the goal that aligns with yours. But ultimately, the only guarantee is if we don't spend that money and get involved now, we are not going to have a win come November.
Ryan, you already spoke enough, so I'm just gonna jump to the birthday boy Harold. Oh, I wasn't supposed to mention that. Sorry. Harold, getting your birthday wish. What does the next like 5 years look like?
Well, cannabis is part of our life, and drinking our cannabinoids is part of our ritual. That's it.
All right, that's where it goes. Okay. I'm going to insert, this is going off script already. We're going to do a quick rapid fire round because there's some good commentary happening in the chat. First up, Gary Kaminsky. Hey, Gary. Intrastate verticals should be considered. Low-dose bevs will have a pathway. Key states are prepping for that. Minnesota, Tennessee. I think it's great that they're prepping for it. I think there's a lot of questions about what can be done, how it's done. Does 280E get introduced? Ryan was talking about payment processors. There's a lot to get ironed out. Again, I think that's what Rand Paul's bill is trying to get at. Although there's still a lot of details that need to get put in. Ryan.
Yeah. I also think we should start understanding who grows hemp. I mean, Minnesota isn't known for outdoor cultivation of anything. Tennessee definitely is. And so I think as we look at some of these states that are going to have the vertical integration, we should be kind of aware of the agricultural landscape that would ultimately even be able to support this industry.
Yeah, good point.
And to Ryan's point earlier, wholesalers actually have federal licenses. So if this is still a Schedule I drug, and it creates some major complications with them potentially carrying these products. So distribution is going to be significantly impacted.
Yeah. And Mark Hauser asks that, hey, Mark, Mark joins us on This Week in Cannabis every Friday through Cultivated News. So join us there as well. Mark is very bright, also a California resident. Have the major alcohol bev distributors and retailers said that they'd still be willing to carry hemp beverages if they're once again controlled substance? And I think that's an interesting question from a state level perspective. We all know what they've told us from the national perspective, right? Like starting this summer, like there's going to be a pretty steep wind down if we don't show significant traction. That's at retail, that's at distribution. And, people are going to try to make money up until November 12th or whatever. But it's going to be a pretty sharp cliff. But at the state level, Ryan, are you hearing anything about local distributors and how they're thinking about this?
I haven't. Largely because, unfortunately, we haven't really seen a lot of local distributors outside of beer distributors or liquor retailers who've been reasonably successful at this. Unfortunately, this year we've seen a couple local distributors who unfortunately closed shop, and they were just ultimately gobbled up by some of these larger kind of AP or alcohol bev distributors. But they'll spawn. I mean, what we know about cannabis and hemp is opportunity creates businesses. And I think that absolutely we will definitely see distributors get spun up. We might even see organizations who own vertical integration, whether it's beverage manufacturing. We see this all the time in regulated cannabis. Beverage manufacturers or manufacturers of consumer packaged goods and cannabis start their own distribution businesses. And so it wouldn't surprise me if a local Tennessee manufacturer of beverages decides to go out and buy a handful of short trucks and start self-distributing as part of their value proposition to their customers. I mean, I see that being a pretty big opportunity for a lot of these groups.
All right. And Lisa Scott says that DC has just dropped a new beverage bill where local breweries, wine, and alcohol manufacturers can partner with a THC manufacturer. So always changing. Okay. We're going to jump into the quality and innovation portion, give Harold some opportunity to answer some of the more science-oriented questions. Question 1 is going to cover some things coming in from Smithers, Rachel Bork, and Kyler Ransom at Fusion Projects, and then a few others. What does product quality actually mean today, and how do you ensure consistency at scale? It's a very broad question. Harold, let's start with the one from Rachel. Like, what do you need most from a testing partner in today's landscape?
Well, right now, I think even from now or in the future, testing partner, we're looking for integrity and also this consistent pursuit of excellence, right? The PM of your machine, the training of your staff, the service of your client. That is, that makes the clients really feel confident in you.
Let's drill down into that a little bit more. And this is a perfect follow-up from Kyler at Fusion Projects. How do you ensure that potency results lab to lab correlate, and what is the common tolerance range?
The common tolerance range usually should be less than 5%. But how do we collaborate among labs? That really requires a national organization, right? To have national standards. You test because gummy can be having different testing method compared to beverages. Even beverages, different types of beverages, the method may be different. So the standards also needs to be standardized. So a national body will be necessary. But without that body, what we're doing now is we anchor the lab results from other labs to a lab that you trust, right? And cross compare. That's the best thing you can do now. But again, that is relative. So we're playing in this relativity game right now. So we use 5% as a relative gauge, right, to measure a lab accuracy.
And then, so like Jerry at Against the Grain Brewery and Scott Wesser both came in with questions around like what's the current state of the market as far as accuracy goes of testing levels, and does it vary from cannabinoid to cannabinoid? And then how does the input material relate to all this? Like, just kind of give us a general what's the current landscape of the quality of materials that are out there? Is it being affected by the current policy changes? Let's drill into the accuracy of the cannabinoids.
Yeah, because of the lacking of national standards for all the cannabinoids and terpenoids, and so this has been a historical challenge for the testing labs. Many years ago, I heard standards vary from supplier to supplier. Now I think it's getting a little improved, and the labs are noticing this, right? They buy in bulk. They anchor with the supplier. They buy in bulk. So this, and working with ASTM and other standard organizations, I have seen trend of efforts to put labs to standardizing. And over, when we work with the lab, the brands will know which lab perform better, right? Which lab has more integrity. So over time, I think the better labs will emerge as the leaders in the space. And so for the lab testing, the accuracy, the more decibel you have, like 0.003, is better than 0.03, especially for low dose beverages, right? So I think that is becoming standards in the lab right now. I haven't seen different cannabinoids. They have different accuracy. Most of them are pretty good right now if you stick with one lab.
Very good. All right, let's bring it a little bit closer to the consumer and probably a little bit more digestible for the crowd. We'll work into the product zone. Where is real product innovation happening right now, and what's actually driving growth? And Ryan, I'm going to start with you because you work with a lot of these brands and the products they're delivering, and let's cover a number of questions here. So like Paulo at Fusion Project, what's up, Paulo? What minor cannabinoids are on trend? And then Ben Dreyfus, our friend at Contract Canna, asks about emulsion technology and it changing either now or over the next 12 months.
Yeah. I think when I look at, I think hemp and regulated are a little bit different. And the reason I say this is because although we have nationally distributed hemp and they are visibly in a lot of places in a lot of states, I still think we're still trying to wrap people's heads around drinking THC. And so I feel like the big word of innovation in beverage, and when you look at sales data, the sales data that we look at, they're generally just seltzers or full flavored spindrift fruit beverages. And so I think now a lot of people are trying to launch innovative products and they're trying to incorporate a lot of ingredients, but I feel like a lot of times it can be confusing without having the right trade marketing. And there's a handful of companies who are doing this really well. They're using tag words to just give people the understanding of like, what is this drink going to do to me? And the example I always say is, how do you tell someone what a high feels like if they've never been high before? There's a bunch of adjectives and verbs that you could use, but the reality is you don't really know what that feels like until you try it. And so at this point, I feel like a lot of people, and the sales data show this, they gravitate to flavors that they like and beverages that they typically consume. And so my experience in kind of regulated is innovation is always very difficult in our space. If you think about it, the most innovative thing in regulated cannabis is probably the infused pre-roll. It's probably the biggest innovative product that has come to market. And it's a combination of multiple products put together. When we start looking at cannabinoids, there's a handful of brands who are doing exceptionally well with CBG and CBN. I feel like we all could probably sleep a little bit better at night. And so CBN has been a huge driver of that. But when we look at the regulated market, CBN has exploded this year. And we can give a shameless plug to our friends at FloraWorks who've done an unbelievable job of really supporting that category with CBN. And I think we're going to continue to see these minor cannabinoids. But I think the reality is it's extremely difficult to market because you can only kind of use buzzwords. You can't actually say what the product's going to do to you. You can say relax and chill and uplifting, but you can't actually tell people what it's going to do. And so I think that's the most difficult part. And the groups that continue to figure out trade marketing for these cannabinoids are the ones that are winning because they're just better at describing what the effect. And if the effect matches the product, then it's a big win. I mean, Ben, we talk about Hio all the time and how they coined the term float, and they've done an unbelievable job by doing so. And that's really a great example of how impactful trade marketing can be when you choose the right trigger words to really support the effect or the product that you're trying to portray. And that's where we see success. So to me, innovation can be a variety of different things, but without the ability to effectively market it and do the proper trade marketing to get the messaging out to the consumer, the innovation just sits on a shelf and it's confusing to everyone.
Yeah. I'm going to do a faux pas and I'm going to pull regulatory back into this because Diana, I recall seeing a federal bill that had some language in it that was something along the lines of not allowing ingredients to be formulated into THC products that alter the effect of THC. And I'm curious as to how you think about that, or if you remember the bill and like we all know about the entourage effect in cannabis. That seems like incredibly problematic if we start seeing language like that.
Correct. And I think their main goal is to prevent what I think we all remember, the Four Loko experience, where you had multiple intoxicants in one product, and they consider caffeine to be of an intoxicating format. So what they're trying to avoid is multiple intoxicants in one product, But it's hard because this is a different type of ingredient than they're used to regulating. These different active ingredients and different minor cannabinoids do change the effect, which makes the predictability difficult and makes regulators' jobs very hard because their job is to protect the consumer and make sure that the consumer knows what they are going to get from consuming these products. And right now, they're playing catch up with understanding all of the cannabinoids in the from the plant, which are naturally derived, which are a result of conversion, which is another question because I know there's a lot of people concerned about CBN or THCV potentially not being, available depending on how they define synthetics. And those are real concerns. And I think ultimately it comes down to groups like the FDA defining which cannabinoids can be included in products along with THC. But I also think that's why you see a lot of product right now on the shelves that doesn't have ratios of minor cannabinoids to THC because it's cleaner from a regulatory standpoint to not have those ratios oftentimes.
Yeah. It's interesting. I spend a lot of time thinking about like what happens if we end up having like this bifurcated market where you have low dose products in the open retail channels and then dispensaries to have all the fun products. No offense to all those being sold. Like I love my hemp beverages, but I'm like live rosin products. I mean, there's a bunch of ingredients in a live rosin that alter the effect of THC. And
I think that goes a lot to what we've said, though, about the evolution of the consumer. THC beverages, the low dose hemp beverages that we're talking about that are in Total Wine and Specs and all of these places, they're oftentimes the first experience for THC for some of these consumers. And once they get more familiar, we've always said that there's a progression for the consumer to get familiar with cannabis. Beverage normalizes it. They get comfortable with THC. And then maybe they go to a dispensary and they start asking about the other products. They ask the questions about the other minor cannabinoids. I think there's a natural progression there. And while I would love to see some of the, like I love THCV and I love seeing it alongside THC beverages, maybe we have to start with THC only and maybe some CBD and a handful that are permitted for beverage going through the adult beverage channel right now, with the idea that in the future we can gain more access to them, but the dispensaries can carry them. And again, the main goal that we should be thinking of in the short term is normalization of THC, because that's how we make progress with the rest of the cannabinoids.
All right, well, I'll
I
let you
know.
continue to fight that battle, and I'll
Just the word cannabinoid can be overwhelming for the new consumer, right? So like we're still getting their feet wet.
What was really
Right.
interesting in the lead up to all this was also thinking about formats in the space, because before this ban happened, we saw like John Halper at Top 10 Liquors really celebrating like the popularity of gummies and how they immediately became the number one SKU in his retail shops. And that's great. I love the fact that one's leading to the other and there is that expansion opportunity, but it does become challenging in the conversation of bringing it all to the masses.
Yeah, particularly at the federal level. I mean, you have to think about some of the people I'm talking to on the Hill. You start talking about intoxicating what they think of candy. Their head isn't there yet. They're not wrapped around it. Intoxicating beverage, adult beverages, they're very familiar with that. So that's oftentimes the hurdles that we're having to overcome, is just the fact that this is so new to even the regulators and the policymakers we're talking to. So we might need to start somewhere else, start with beverage, because that can normalize it and create a pathway for other products. But we know that the other form factors, we know that, I think I could be misquoting, but I'm pretty sure it was Can that said 74% of their consumers also consumed gummies. So there's a major overlap between these form factors, particularly gummies that have gone very mainstream, but it can be very hard for the regulator to come around to figuring out what's the appropriate pathway for this product.
Okay, regulatory, I'm going to put you back in a box.
I'm good.
Let me go back into the world where I don't have to think about that stuff. Harold, beverage, gummy, regulator or not, like what ingredient innovations, and this is for Ben Dreyfus, what are you excited about?
Yeah, we have a good foundation right now, right? We can infuse low dose beverage, high dose beverages in reaching stability. But now looking forward, I think is the specialized formulas. For example, can we deliver a clear formula that is organically driven, right? Can we, which does not touch any synthetic ingredients? Can we put emotion into protein-based beverages because protein may have interactions with our traditional emotion? Things like that, right? Can we support a high temperature pasteurization? So those typical, particular requirements becoming a demand for our innovation.
Yeah. Do you have any predictions about what we might see over the next 12 months?
Well, given the gummy talk, I know our team is working on emotion for gummy, right? Yeah, emotion can be going to the beverages, but when you put emotion into the gummy, you make the gummy, the potency distribution is very homogeneous. And then the onset, the overall experience, including the onset, is quicker. The offsets can be quicker. So you can consumer this more defined experience, right? Than just a long, dull, lasting experience. So, I think this is where we talk about innovation, where we're seeing the liking of innovation in certain sectors, but now it may be an opportunity for us to, offer innovation to this sector.
It's funny you mentioned that, Harold. I mean, we're seeing that in New York. When I look at the sales data for edibles in New York, which is a really big emerging market, 2 of the top 5 brands use fast acting in their edibles, and so I think that's a trend we're going to continue to see.
The number one complaint that we see on things like Reddit from consumers about gummies is the inconsistent duration, the offset. So I think it's also the consistent experience and talking about the fact that this is more controllable, similar to how beverages gained normalcy and actually gotten insurance providers to support on-premise consumption. The closer gummies and other edibles can get to that consistency of the duration, the more mainstream and acceptance we'll see for those categories as well.
So much easier to just drink a beverage, take a sip, see how you feel, put it away. I feel like everyone kind of has their funny horror story that they don't want to share in public about when they tried edibles and how they had an inconsistent experience. Maybe we'll save that for the next one.
Yeah. You just made me look at the time, and we're gonna have to like land this plane at a certain point and maybe open up for Q&A. Maybe we can parallel process. If you guys have questions that you haven't already typed in the chat, please continue to do so. We're going to jam through a consolidated session of market trends and business strategy. I'm just going to push it all into one. Ryan, let's kick it off with you. What should operators be prioritizing right now to stay competitive, knowing that we have uncertainty on the hemp side? The cannabis industry is growing and evolving steadily, as it always is. Are hemp brands crossing over into cannabis? Is there going to be more competition in cannabis because of it? What should brands be doing right now?
I think it's all of the above. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of crossover. I think a lot of brands have been waiting to probably the summer to see if there's going to be any meaningful traction. I think at that point, they're going to be faced with the decision. The decision is going to be pretty simple, right? They're going to have 3 decisions. 1, do we enter the functional beverage space, keep our brand alive? That functional beverage can be a range of products, potentially including alcohol. 2, do we transition to the regulated space? There's a lot of nationally distributed brands that have unbelievable D2C presence. And so I think the big question mark remains is if a place like Tennessee, as an example, continues to have vertical integration and I'm a huge brand and I have great D2C presence in Tennessee, can I shift my focus to drive a lot of those consumers to vertical integration in Tennessee? If I have a big presence in Illinois and Illinois doesn't have vertical integration, but we have great partners who manufacture beverages there, can we drive those consumers to regulated stores? And the other final thought is, do we just sell as much as we can, do as much as we can before the end of the year, and go dormant and come back stronger than ever? I think those are 3 decisions that are going to be faced with. I think truthfully, we're working on all 3 strategies with a handful of our customers. We have no intention to enter the functional beverage space, but I think there's a really big opportunity for brands who have access to distribution. I mean, in beverage, we've never seen what we just saw in the last 3 years. We've never seen the ability for someone to launch a beverage, get mainstream success, whether it's through a Total, an ABC, a Specs, working with some of the biggest distributors in the business, and really developing a name for themselves. Why would they let that reputation go undone? I wouldn't, and I wouldn't recommend anyone does. So I think it's going to be picking the right spot, picking the right partners, and really keeping that brand alive any way that you can, and coming back stronger than ever. And it's only if November happens, of course.
Yeah, the crossovers outside of the industry are interesting. We've seen Hippie Water launch energy drinks, and most recently like a cold brew coffee. And I know some folks are even thinking about potentially crossing over into the alcohol space. And so, yeah, just really interesting to see how people are diversifying. But what we're also hearing is like just keeping inventory really tight, which I think reflects in our business a bit. You know, I think average order sizes are dropping and frequency is increasing. And we're seeing that across the supply chain. I know it's put a lot of pressure on co-packers and whatnot. There's some, so speaking of role players and what they're doing to adapt to the space, Diana, you might have some good insight into this. Jimmy Seafreak from Zentopia asks, like, how are hemp farmers reacting, and how will that affect either pricing now or later?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We did hear that a lot of the farmers did plant. I think some of them seek comfort in the CMS program requiring hemp and making a clearer pathway and feeling like there has to be a change before November 12th, and therefore they planted. But we still have a limited amount, particularly if there is a restriction to naturally derived D9. There could be a restriction on just demand or just supply in general. So I think it makes sense to be thinking about that. I think we could see a price difference if we do have limited supply, but we are hearing that the farmers did in fact plant. But we do not, I mean, that's the problem with hemp. Hemp is 45,000 acres in the US. Texas alone has hundreds of thousands of acres of other products being grown. So like we're still kind of a small dot on the radar nationally. So we need those hemp groups to plant. Otherwise, we need a pathway forward for converted material with purity testing standards.
Awesome. All right. Well, like every good meeting that's scheduled to be 45 minutes, I don't have a hard stop until the top of the hour, so I think we'll just keep going. But I understand if a bunch of you have to drop off, I'll just kind of signal kind of a pseudo end right now. We will follow up with everyone who sent in their questions. Thank you so much for fueling that portion of the show. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just do a quick rapid fire round of like going around the horn. Is like, what's your like top piece of advice to people? And you can take this from like the hemp beverage perspective. Someone can answer for the regulated dispensary perspective. We got some questions about that, or science and product. So who's best at thinking on their feet? I'm going to go to Ryan first. He's nodding his head vigorously.
It's the day old saying, cash is king. I don't know how else to say it. I think you need to be nimble, you need to be agile, you need to be very much focused on driving profitability, on keeping as much money as you can in that bank account, and really make smart decisions. And I think working with the right partners to really identify what tomorrow looks like, and putting together a strategy and implementing it so that if the time comes that you're ready and nimble and ready to kind of do what needs to be done to keep that brand alive. I know that seems to be kind of the theme that I continue to say, but I feel like it's really the best path forward. And I think we're going to see a lot of big crossover. You know, Ben mentioned Hippie Water. We just saw Can launch an energy drink. We're seeing High Rise launch functional beverages. We're continuing to see a lot of these brands cross over. And I think some of them are going to do exceptionally well because they're very good at what they do. And so I'm excited to see the next wave come out of this, regardless of what happens.
Amazing. Harold.
Well, in this called downturn, I think what we're involving is with ASTM is the national standards, right? We have been running fast and meeting the demand, but now we have the time to sit down with the experts. So we are involved with a couple of national standards. One, how do you tell cannabis apart by using FTIR? We are writing that into national standards. So not only cannabis beverages, but regular beverages people can use the IR method. Two, how do you do a cannabis rinse? If you have scalping, cannabinoid on a liner, that is going to a national standard too. And three, and most importantly, how do we qualify cannabis-based emulsion, non-emulsion, right? What is the standards to measure the shelf life and the emulsion quality? So with that three standards coming out, I think later this year, that will set our industry in a better framework, right? And I know ASTM is also working on what's the purity quality. for synthetic or converted cannabinoids. So all those standards are important for the industry. I think now we have some breathing room for that. But internally, our team is driving to innovations like new formulas, right? Clean formula, organic formula, and also gummy formula, right? We're bringing new innovations into different space, and I'm excited about that.
Amazing. Diana.
Ultimately, what I'm hearing from a lot of brands is they're not sure which direction to go in. Do they get very conservative? Do they pivot into a new category? I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach than how Ryan and Harold did. I think whatever decision you make for your company, you really need to commit to it now and stick to it. Because if you keep changing your position on what you're going to do come November, we only have so much time. And so you need to be preparing. And this is what our team is here for. You can ask questions about certain opportunities. We can tell you what we're seeing. This is why these opportunities to get on calls where we answer your questions are important, because we can give you as much information as we can see about the marketplace. But I think the number one thing that brands need to do right now is commit to a strategy. Pick one and lean into it and stick to it, because there's only so much time to execute that strategy. And I do think, to Ryan's point, we are seeing a lot of brands look at either entering the regulated market, entering into the alcohol space, or going into the functional beverage category. I would say if you're a brand pitching a lifestyle, look at what else is tandem to you that could fit into that lifestyle. Because there might be other things that have less regulation that can keep you afloat while we fix this problem at the federal level and create the opportunity for your existing business to eventually grow on.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I also just want to remind everyone that the reason why a lot of brands who are national at this point and why they've been successful is because of focus. Like Diana is very clear in what she's saying is if you come up with a plan and stick to it, don't just jump all over the place, because the reality is we got to where we are by being extremely focused on what we need to achieve. And we see that in all consumer packaged goods. The moment you lose focus, the moment you try to go above and beyond and do things that are outside of your lifestyle or your branding or your assets, that's where you continue to run into roadblocks or difficulties. So the biggest word I would say is focus is my advice.
Yeah. Well, and we know that with every constraint comes opportunity, right? This industry constantly throws up barriers, and it forces people to innovate. Kimmy's asking about whether like CBN, CBD, and CBG will live outside the ban. I think some people are fearful that the ban has unintended consequences of killing the supply chain. But going to the 30,000 foot level, I think the intention of everything that we've seen since November is that we want to maintain the therapeutic sides of hemp and maintain space for these cannabinoids. I know we have CBD clients that are very much planning on that being the case. And to Diana's point, we need definitions to change just to make the executive orders viable, right? And so feeling very positive about that. But I've even had people ask me, it's like, oh, do you plan on serving the 0.4 milligram opportunity? And I'm like, do people want that? I mean, I wouldn't not want it, I guess. If you're going to offer me a product that has a little bit of THC on that might be better than seltzer water at a bar. What do you guys think? Would you drink a 0.4 milligram beverage? Harold, is it even possible to get this, keep that in a product and keep it accurate?
Can be challenging if you go to 12 ounce. But with labs, they can develop a particular testing method for that.
Oh, look at this. We're getting a little bit of response here. Alyssa and Gary, and yeah, people are looking at 0.4 milligram products. So I guess we better be prepared for that.
And I think the other thing too is, coming back to definitions. Does that mean we see a bunch of 0.4 milligram 2 ounce shots and things like that? I mean, it could get really interesting with what we end up seeing in market if people want to get creative enough. But I think one thing that, as the regulatory person, and I always say I'm the human wet blanket as a result of this, whenever we end up doing and innovating and pivoting on, I always think about how is the regulator or the person who intended and wrote that language going to feel about whatever workaround or whatever pathway moves forward. And that ultimately becomes the conversation I have to have in the room. But we also have to think about how do we want to be responsible operators. We want to sell products that deliver an experience to the consumer that is positive. So we do have to be really responsible about whatever our next steps are as an industry, not just individuals.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is your terrible response to the how did CBD beverage?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just been a slow death for the category since it launched. Although, okay, John Deneen mentions Colorado's experience with the 1.75 milligram THC hemp products. Challenging market, yes, but also a wonderful product. You know, both Fabric and Fable, I think, are great products. I stay at the Clayton oftentimes when I go to Denver, and you know, order 2 or 3. It makes a nice little lunch edition.
That was one of my favorite things after the Cannabis Summit earlier this year. There was the happy hour at the end, and a lot of us were standing around drinking the 2 milligram,
Yeah.
1.75 like drinks. And it just goes to show that I know the data is showing that 10 milligrams and up are like a lot of the volume. There's absolutely a market for that low dose product. And I think someone did actually ask the question. There were a lot of questions, but someone said, like, is there a pathway forward for this? And absolutely, these are sessionable products. That's what beverage is notorious for. Adult beverage is known for not just having one drink and being done. So that actually excites me to see people in our space embracing the lower dose options. I think 0.4 is really pushing it. But you know, a 1 to 2 milligram beverage in the right format and not too much liquid could actually, I think, be very successful and probably more palatable for on-premise, because I know there's a lot of concerns just about these products coexisting when other adult beverages are being sold.
Absolutely. All right. I think we'll put a pin in it there. Thank you so much. First, obviously, to my incredible team. It really is. It's a great opportunity to get you all together. It's not always easy aligning our calendars, but yeah, it turns out I actually like you guys. That's kind of cool. And of course, thank you to everyone dropping in the comments and attending this webinar, for sending in your questions and helping us create some content for you. Please let us know what you think. Shoot any one of us a message and just tell us if we should do this again, what we should talk about next time, how we should change it, if we should just kill it. We appreciate you. If you want to get more involved on the policy conversation or just stay really up to date what's happening with hemp beverages, please talk to Diana, join Kaba, doing really incredible work there. If you want to hear more of my voice, you can always subscribe to the High Spirits podcast. We had Richie Proud from Ianthus on today. Really interesting to hear, actually, an MSO perspective that appreciates the discovery that hemp has created. And he's actually seen a lot of patients come into his dispensaries through the hemp channel. So that was really refreshing to hear from him. You can always get everything you need to know about the science of what we do through Harold on LinkedIn. He is known as the Happy Chemist. If you didn't know, now you know. And then Ryan Pinsky. You either know or you don't. Just text him or call him. Sorry, Ryan, I don't have a better ending for you, but you're truly that guy. Appreciate all you. Hey, Pablo, awesome. Yeah, wait to the very end. All right. Yeah, appreciate all of you. We'll see you next time.